our recording. So I saw a video that a guy shot from his kitchen. It was on YouTube, and he was showing the flames outside his windows of his house.
Wow.
I mean, it was burning everywhere. And he was in there with his dog. And he said, I'm trying to decide whether to stay or not. And I thought, well, I hope you haven't made the decision too late, because it looked to me like he ought to be out of there. So I wanted to kind of talk about that. I know one time you guys, not very long ago, when we lived, Patty and I lived in Arizona, you had the big fire up in the Prescott area, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
You mean the forest fire that came so close to town there one time?
Yeah. And
and we had a catastrophic fire that destroyed our entire office and warehouse complex at Bennett Oil one year, 2005.
Oh, really? Wow. Didn't know that.
One of our employees was transferring high octane racing fuel from a big 250 gallon tote into 55 gallon drums and 5-gallon buckets, and maybe a pint at the most spilled on the top of a metal 55-gallon drum, and she took an oil rag to wipe it up, which is something I've done 1,000 times.
Yeah.
And she wiped one way, and as she wiped back the other way, the rag touched the sleeve of her work shirt, and the static electricity from just 2 wipes on the top of that little thing sparked. Flame came up, and she turned and went to a fire extinguisher that was only 10, 15 feet away. But by the time she got back, it had gone up into that 250-gallon tote, and it burned the whole office complex down, our whole building.
Wow.
Only the exterior walls remained. And so I remember I was president of the Senate at that time. And I got this desperate call from our general manager, or actually our financial officer, chief financial officer at Bennett Oil. He's screaming, Bennett Oil's on fire, and you got to get up here. And I raced up there, and when I got there, it was still burning, but they just about had it out. It was one of the largest fires in Prescott's history. But that was just one building burning. And I'm looking at pictures in California where just entire subdivisions are gone.
Yeah, 28. I think I heard the latest number was 28,000 homes and buildings. Yeah.
Wow.
And then I saw some video of the Malibu beach area as you go north out of Santa Monica, and you come out of the tunnels, and the interstate turns into the Coast Highway. All along there, it goes into Malibu, and then there's houses on the beach side of the road, and they're all gone. I mean, they are gone. $10 million homes. Yeah.
That's where Pepperdine University is, isn't it?
Yeah, right. Yeah, Pepperdine's right up in the hills behind that. Yeah, and so, yeah, it's, and I guess they've got 3 or 4 areas burning now, and then I heard another story the other day about. Not a story, but this, I don't know if you guys knew that Biden flew in there the other day. I don't know if he's still there or not. But they shut down all the air traffic in the area, so the air tankers couldn't do their job.
Oh my goodness.
So they put out a news notice that it was because of the wind they couldn't fly. Right.
It's a Democrat area.
But they actually had the airspace closed down because the president was there.
Wow.
So, sometimes it's better for the president to stay away for a little bit, right? When you're in the middle of the raging, event, right? There's nothing he can do anyway. He can't go into the control center and start fighting the fire. He hasn't got a clue what to do. So just stay away and let those people do their thing.
During Katrina, George Bush got chastised for flying over New Orleans but not landing.
Yeah.
And his rationale was, if I go in there, it shuts down everything. Everybody, all the cops have to come and protect me instead of protecting the houses from looters and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But, the Democrats didn't let that one go by. But I wanted to mention something that you said earlier, Don, which was about the guy standing there trying to decide whether to go or not to go.
Mhm.
You know, Arizona has the Ready, Set, Go program
Yeah.
or evacuations and that sort of thing, and that's very important. But it reminded me of a story, just like you, a story of an Air Force cadet or pilot trainee was flying with his instructor, and the instructor said, "When do you make the decision to bail out?" And the trainee or pilot trainee said, "Well, I guess if my engine failed or if it was a fire or this." And he said, "No, you make the decision to bail out right now. And then if the fire happens, you know what to do." And that goes with what you were saying about this guy. He should have already known when he was going to leave his house.
Yeah. Yeah.
In the event of a fire. That's part of the being prepared thing.
That's right. Yeah.
I was on the roof. I'm sorry. No, go ahead, Paul. Finish your thought.
Well, I'm just saying that we have. He was talking about being prepared and that sort of thing, and we have a little fireproof box. I just got a little Pelican case with wheels on it, and that's going to be one of the first things that goes in the Jeep is this box. It's got our passports and our mortgage and our credit cards and everything that I don't that I want to have after the house burns down, so that I can rebuild from there, because a lot of people have to leave their house. These guys left their houses at 5 o'clock in the morning with their clothes on. That was basically it.
Yeah. They jumped in their cars, drove down the highway, and then a lot of them just parked on the highway and started running.
Right. And we don't know what they got to take with them. But when they get back to the house, all of that information is gone. They got to start from scratch.
Yeah.
And that's what you want to be prepared to avoid.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's
Well,
go ahead.
I was working on my roof. I'm installing a roof on my house, metal roof.
Right.
And I have a handyman friend there in town in Prescott, but he was from that area, and so he had lots of very close friends. And he was a handyman in the Palisades and all of those places, and so he has lots of people that he knew. And And one of his buddies called and said that Pierre, another common friend that the two of them had, house was right smack in the way, and he called Pierre and got a hold of him, and then when he called the next time, it couldn't reach him, but afterwards they got some pictures that the fire had destroyed his whole home, and the other friend told him that they had a matter of like 10 to 15 minutes before they had to go.
Yeah.
And they said with the winds and the exacerbation of the winds that the fire creates, the winds were over 100 miles an hour. It's like a firestorm in the middle of a hurricane.
Yeah.
Level 2 hurricane. And it was just racing, and I bet people had but a few minutes to get out.
Yeah. Well, I lived in California for 9 years, Southern California. We lived in the Moore Park Thousand Oaks area, which is northwest of Woodland Hills, which is actually north up to 405 north of LA. So on the north side of Los Angeles and the other side of the hills. As you go west on the 405 going out west, you go past Calabasas and you go all the way out to the coast. And so I drove home. There were a couple times I drove home when I was working there, and the hills were on fire in Thousand Oaks and Calabasas, and then another time they were on fire over in the Moore Park area. So I mean, I've seen it before where it's burning up on the hills and everybody's down in their houses looking, seeing, saying, what are we going to do and where are we going to go and are we supposed to go or, so yeah, it's something that happens almost every year in Southern California with the Santa Ana winds. Very common. The winds get up, like Ken said, from 80 to 100 miles an hour. I mean, it really gets, you get a high pressure off the coast and you get a low pressure in toward Arizona, and those combine, the rotation combines and turns into the Santa Ana winds, and it blows toward the ocean. So
I can attest to those winds. My two friends and I took a motorcycle trip from Phoenix to San Diego to Las Vegas to the north rim of the Grand Canyon and then back down to Phoenix. And as we left San Diego, we hit the Santa Ana winds. And I swear our bikes were leaning over about 15 degrees into that wind just to go straight down the highway.
Yeah,
It's incredible how hard that wind was blowing.
yeah. And it's a fire's best friend, right? I mean, it just blows the coals everywhere. So yeah, it's just a horrible thing. So I thought, well, in light of that fire down there and what those folks are going through, and by the way, is his friend okay, Ken, as far as you know?
He's okay as far as his life was spared, but
Yeah.
I saw some pictures. He forwarded me some pictures this morning. Apparently, this was a man of some means and was involved in music. He was a drummer or some type of a musician for several rock bands over the years.
Oh,
And
okay.
so he had a beautiful home, collection of Model T Fords and all kinds of musical instruments. And the whole thing is just gone.
Just all gone. Wow.
Very sad.
Yeah, that really is. So, well, anyway, in light of all that, I thought, well, maybe it's a good thing to talk about is survival and what things do people need to do if they're faced with that event. Now, one thing I wanted to tell you guys, I don't know if you heard about. Did you hear about the friendly fire incident over in the Middle East where one of our, I think it was the USS Gettysburg, which is a guided missile cruiser, shot down an F-18 accidentally, of course.
Yeah.
Hadn't heard that yet.
Well,
Yeah, they were.
a couple weeks ago.
Drones were coming out, and so they got the F-18 mixed up with some of these drones and fired on it and shot them down.
They were on landing approach to the carrier, and what you do when you're landing, all the ships line up in a long line, so you have like this sea of lights along the way that the airplane can see at night, right? So he flies right over all those ships. Well, he wasn't quite to the Gettysburg yet, and the carrier was in front of the Gettysburg when they saw the missile come up. Well, they watched the missile, and the guy said, and he's talked about it already. He said, "Do we pull the seat? Do we get out of here, or is it?" And then it started turning toward them, so they went ahead and ejected. He made the decision, And if the pilot, it's a two-seater F-18, so if the pilot pulls the ejection seat, the navigator goes out too. Each guy doesn't have to pull the seat. Once the pilot initiates, you're both gone. So he got them both out, and they both got picked up later, and the missile hit the plane, and then they actually fired a missile at the plane behind them, and they took evasive action. They had time to take evasive action and get out of there. But you can imagine having seconds, right, to decide whether you're going to, live or die. You're gonna do the right thing. What are you gonna do? So people can be faced with this thing in fires and earthquakes and tornadoes and of course down in Florida, hurricanes and so it's good to be prepared for that kind of event if you live in a risk area. And I think I was kind of looking at some data today before I started the show. There is I don't know how good it is. It's actually called a FEMA map. Now I hate using that term because FEMA doesn't have a very good reputation right now, but it is called a FEMA map. And you can click on it and find out what kind of a risk area you're in, which would be pretty handy for some people. I mean, some people probably don't know how risky the area is they're here. I think if you're up in a forest area like Prescott, you're in a kind of a dry state like Arizona, your risk is probably pretty high, right? The same down in Tucson with you remember when Mount Lemmon caught on fire. And that was what, Paul, 2002, 2003 that it burned so bad? Because I had just started working at Raytheon, and
I was at sea, so I don't
were you
remember
still
that.
on the ocean? Yeah, well, it was sometime in there, 2003, 2004, 2002. I'm not sure, but I mean, we came out of work, and the whole top of Mount Lemmon was burning up, And
I've seen the results of it.
Now, there's not a lot of population up there, but still, it was really bad. It was very dry time of year. There were high winds, so and it burned some places on the mountain. It burned down quite a ways. So, and then we've got places like LA, which, you know, they have a lot of fires down there. They have fires in Northern California too, but up in the forest areas. But LA is so densely populated in some places, right? And I learned something too. Did you guys know eucalyptus trees were so flammable?
No.
Yeah, they've got there's an oil base, so they're very, very flammable. And they've got eucalyptus trees everywhere down in Southern California. So they have a lot of eucalyptus trees. They populate themselves. You know, they spread really easily too. So they haven't mitigated any of that. And then in 2014, they passed a proposition to collect more rainwater in the reservoirs and other places so that they would have more water in Southern California, you know, because of the water cutoff that was going on. And Paul and I were talking about that before you came on, Ken, where they're trying to save the smelt or whatever, the smelt fish, you know, turned off the water in the San Joaquin Valley, and a lot of it doesn't get down to Southern California, so the snow melt. So they had a water problem. A lot of the firemen in LA got to a hydrant, and there was no pressure. There's no water.
Yeah.
So that's not good when you're when you're trying to fight a fire like that, right? I mean, that's about the worst case. So a lot of stuff going on down there. So I think the first thing I tell people is, you know, if you're faced with that situation in an emergency like that, don't depend on the government to help you initially, particularly initially, right? You're going to have to make some decisions yourself. Someone is not going to probably come to help you out. Somebody may come knock on your door, but they may not, right? They may not have time to do that. So, and LA's a pretty big area, right? I mean, I don't know how far it is across Los Angeles from north to south, east to west, but it's got to be 60, 70 miles, 80 miles maybe.
Probably.
I mean,
it's not like Sao Paulo where you are still at cruising altitude when you cross the city limits.
yeah. So,
So Paul, what observations or recommendations do you have for people on emergency preparedness?
right.
Well, there's two kinds of emergencies, Ken, that I see. One is like this fire thing where you've got 5, 10, 15 minutes to pack your stuff and get out. And but you're going someplace where you know, to a hotel or a motel or something in another area that's not affected by the immediate emergency. And for that you need, like I said, this I call it a financial bug out bag. And in that you've got your any kind of jewelry that you want to save, your mortgage, bank accounts, credit card numbers, financial account information, some money. I keep some cash in there, a little gold and silver for emergencies, and anything else that you would want to have when you come out of the other side of this thing. The other side is if you're going to be going somewhere and you don't know where you're going. And for that, you need you need to take that bug out bag, your financial bug out bag, but you also need another bag that has change of underwear, socks, clothes, that sort of thing. And then as Don's putting up here, a list of things that would be beneficial for you if, again, you don't know where you're going to go. If you're going to spend that first night out in the woods by yourself, you'd want to have some kind of shelter, a way to build a fire, some lighting, some food that you can heat up or eat cold, and water. Water is very important, and it's good to have water in your car at all times if you're going to be using that car for your bug out. I go by what's called the rule of threes. The rule of threes reads 3 minutes without air, 3 days without water, 3 weeks without food and 3 seconds without hope. And without hope, that kind of comes from not being prepared. If you're prepared and you know that what you've got will keep you alive for 3 weeks, then you've got the hope. In 3 weeks, you can find a way to sustain yourself and meet up with other people, or go to your brother's house or your friend over in the next county or the next state. So those are all things that you want to have. I think I mentioned a lot of what you got on here: cash, change of clothes, food and water. All of those things are important to have handy and available to be moved out. I keep mine not wash tubs, but in plastic tubs, so that I can stack them, and I number them depending on. In other words, number one would have the financial bug out bag and some edible foods that don't need to be prepared. Number two might have more clothes in it. Number three might have I don't know, just extra shoes or things like that. Now, a lot of people would say, well, what about firearms and ammunition? Well, that's part of my everyday carry. And I have firearms in the car, in the Jeep already with ammunition. So that doesn't have to necessarily be moved out in my situation, but in somebody else's who was driving a sedan or something like that and didn't carry that around with them. It'd be a good idea to have something to protect yourself with. If you're a hunter, then you would want to have that kind of capability also.
One of the things I saw that wasn't on the list, Paul and Ken, was some kind of medical supplies, particularly a first aid kit at least, and then I would recommend some kind of some kind of medical kit that has different, maybe even has antibiotics in it or things like that. If you have to end up going 2 or 3 weeks, who knows what you're going to run into and face. And then I would recommend getting, what do they call that? I'm trying to think of where quick clot, is it called quick clot?
Quick clot's one of them, the Cell-X. Yeah. You can impregnated gauze.
Yeah, you can put on a wound and stop the bleeding right away, right? If you can't, it's.
Yeah, I also carry 2 IFAKs, which is independent first aid kits, and a trauma kit, which has wound protection or mitigation, tourniquets. And I also carry in my Jeep at all times a medical kit, which includes surgical tools. Now, I know I don't know anything about surgery. I'm not going to be doing surgery, but I carry it because if you're at the scene of an accident or some trauma that happens, and a doctor was there who said, boy, if I just had some tools, I could really help this guy. And so I carry that with me just in case. And the Cell-X is very important. I carry that in my trauma kit, along with the gauze, eye protection, gloves, flashlight, tourniquets. That's all in my trauma kits. And I have one in my car and one in my wife's car in case we're traveling in that. So those things are very important too. You're right.
How about a battery powered radio of some kind?
Battery powered radio is a good idea.
They have it on the list. At least a weather radio might be.
Yeah, when you get an emergency radio like that, you want to have something that can be powered different ways. The emergency radio I have can be powered with a hand crank. It's got a little solar panel that'll keep it running during the day. And
that's what I have too.
It's got batteries, and then you can also plug it into a USB port if you have power of some kind. Yeah. You can also, you can buy these little USB cigarette lighter plugs and plug that in to power the radio. So those are good things, and communication is important, because if we have any kind of a big thing, I'm sure down in Palisades and that area in there, cell phones went out of service pretty quickly.
Oh, they're gone. Yeah, the towers are all burned up. Yeah,
towers are burned up, but even if it's not the towers being burned up, there's so many phone calls going on at the same time that the towers melt down. So you got to be careful about that. Satellite phone is a good thing to have if you feel like you can find somebody outside of the area that you can talk to.
Yeah, let me ask a question about Do you know a lot about Starlink, Ken or Paul?
I don't know a lot about Starlink, but I understand it's a very viable system that Elon Musk has put up.
Yeah,
And
he's actually. I don't mean to interrupt. I read this morning he's set them up over in L.A. because they didn't have any way to broadcast the news or get the word out in a lot of places. So he's got them hooked up to Starlink now.
yeah,
And,
what Starlink can do. It can provide you internet service
right.
anywhere in the world. It's kind of like, I don't know if you remember the old Motorola Iridium system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
77 satellites so that you could make a phone call from anywhere in the world to anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
This gives you instant internet connectivity from anywhere in the world to anywhere in the world. So he's put those up over in Ukraine, for instance, with the war over there, so that people locally could have internet access. And yeah, I hadn't heard about him doing it in LA, but it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, you just got it set up either yesterday morning or this morning, because one of the TV stations was saying they were just able to put their signal up because they were hooked up with Starlink now. So,
yeah.
Do you guys know anything about the Tesla phones?
Nope. I don't heard about that.
I don't either, but they're supposed to work on Starlink.
Actually, from what I understand, if your phone works on the internet, in other words, my cell phone, I can make internet calls.
Right.
And from what I understand, if you log into Starlink, I don't know whether you need an account or not.
Yeah.
But if you log into Starlink, then you can use the internet to make your phone calls to wherever you want. It's like voice over IP.
I think you have to have Apple 13 or 14 works like that. One of the newer Apple phones are able to connect with Starlink. So people might think about some of those things because, yeah, you're right. You're not going to have, in a disaster like this, you can forget about your cell phone. So you're going to need a way to, and I think satellite phones now are probably $600 to $1,200, aren't they?
They got down pretty inexpensively. There's a guy up in Tempe or Mesa named Craig, who has a company, RF2Go, and he will give you a satellite phone if you sign up for you subscribe to his service for about $100 a month.
Okay.
At least that was a promotion he was running at one time. Now whether he's still doing it or not, I don't know, but it's available.
I've tried it. I've talked to Patty before about saying, hey, I said maybe we should buy our kids each, my son and my daughter and her daughter. Let's maybe buy them a satellite phone and get one ourselves, so that if all communications is lost, we would have the ability to talk to each other in an emergency, right?
And that will probably work unless the emergency is enemy action. And when I say enemy action, I'm talking about like an EMP or something like that.
Oh, yeah, right. Well, yeah.
Damage the satellites as well as our ground terrestrial communications capabilities. So. But yeah, for something like this, where your daughter was in LA and she grabs her satellite phone, jumps in the car, and makes it over to a safe area, you would have that capability.
Yeah. So any experience with satellite phones, Ken?
No, I've not.
Yeah. Well, they're actually just like a regular phone, only they, you connect with satellite. The military uses them all the time for in the middle of nowhere, especially special forces. When you're out in the middle of nowhere. You always have a satellite phone to connect you to wherever you go.
I worked at Motorola for 15 and a half years. Yeah. And my last assignment, my second to last assignment, was working with Iridium, the satellite phone thing. And so when I retired from Motorola, I thought, I'm going to go sailing. I'll be on a boat. I'll be out in the ocean. A satellite phone would be a handy thing to have.
Oh, yeah.
I couldn't afford one. They were $1,500, I think, then. Mm-hmm. And I was just mentioning this to one of the engineers, and he said, oh, wait a minute. And he went over to his locker, and he said, we've already written this one out of stock. It's got zero value. We gave it to a team to go to Mount Everest. And they climbed Mount Everest with this phone so that they could call out from there. He said, take it. And he gave me the phone, the modem, the hookup, the whole thing. And I ran my boat off a satellite phone for 9 years.
Wow, look at that.
Wow.
I could do emails and send emails and calls and that sort of thing. Yeah. Very handy thing to have when you're out in the middle of the ocean.
Yeah, Paul was, for Ken, for your benefit, he was sailing around the Caribbean. For
9 years?
Yeah.
9 years, yeah.
Wow.
Pretty amazing, huh? With his
It
wife.
is.
His wife went with him.
Now that's the amazing part.
She's my hero. It was kind of funny. We'd go out, and she'd never been on a sailboat before, and I'd never been on anything bigger than a Hobie cap. This thing was 35 feet long and 15 feet wide and weighed 10,000 pounds. And it's a whole different world from a Hobie cap. And we'd be out there, and she'd say, something would happen, and she'd say, Paul, what do we do? And I'd say, I don't know. You've been on this boat as long as I have.
Well, I have a wife who says camping is having to stay at the Hyatt instead of the Four Seasons. So
Yeah.
I don't think I could even get her on a boat overnight to save my soul.
Let alone for 9 years, right?
Yeah, not 9 years.
Yeah, it's
she's
pretty amazing story. Well, someday, hopefully, Ken, you'll meet Mary Margaret. She's a sweet lady.
Sounds like it.
Yeah, she's great. So, well, anything else you want to cover about, what do you think about, I guess now.
Well, I just want to ask how many days supply of Dr. Pepper should I have on hand?
Oh, 3 weeks, man.
Okay, thank you. I just needed a little bit of guidance there.
Yeah, good. Yeah, don't forget the Dr. Pepper. Yeah, and some chocolate too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, comfort food is considered a necessary survival item.
Yeah, that's right. The other thing you need too is a good way to start a fire, right?
Right. And they're
Besides matches. I mean, matches are great, but there are other tools now that are fantastic I even saw one the other day where they have this Special Forces flashlight. Have you seen that, Paul? You can start a fire with it.
Fire with it, yeah. One of the things that you might do that I do is I have Mary Margaret, when she cleans the dryer filter, I take that lint and put it in a Ziploc bag, and I keep that in my emergency kit because that dryer
Fluff.
Lint
lights up even with I use a spark maker, a magnesium spark maker.
Yeah.
And that stuff just lights right up, and it burns pretty hot.
Yeah.
And so if you know how to set up a fire, if you took good Boy Scout training about, you put your tinder down on the bottom and then put some little small sticks and then bigger sticks on top of that.
Yep.
You can strike that up, and that lint, that's the word I was looking for, will it'll flare up and burn enough to get the tinder lit.
Yeah, that stuff is pretty free too, right?
Yeah.
Either of you guys were in scouting?
I was
in the Cub Scouts. Never
I'm an Eagle Scout.
I know you were, Ken. Yeah, I know you're an Eagle Scout. Yeah, so you know how to start a fire.
Absolutely.
I'll bet you.
I tell people I got up to Star and was working on life, and I discovered girls, and it all went downhill from there.
That'll do it.
Yeah, that girls and cars, or
girls in cars.
if you let that if you don't get Eagle Scout by about 14, those can be pretty powerful distractions.
They will draw you away from your merit badge run.
What do you think about some kind of signal for help, like a whistle? They mention on here a whistle. Do you think that's a
whistle? Mary Margaret and I both carry whistles on our keychains, and the reason for that is, in the event of a disaster, there'll be all kinds of people yelling help, but the voices are indistinguishable and they don't carry well in the wind.
Yeah.
And so we each carry a survival whistle. We each have a flashlight on our small, like 2-inch flashlight on our keychains, stuff that you carry with you every day, all the time. Whistle's very good. I carry a signal mirror and a compass with me all the time.
That's
so
good. Yeah.
A signal mirror, if you know how to use one, is very, very handy.
Yeah.
This is a small emergency signal mirror. It's not the big 10 things that in your survival kits. But all of those things are very important to have if you get caught out. I don't know if you remember the 2 girls that were coming home from somewhere, and they were on a back forest road, and they locked the gates, and they got caught in there, caught in the snow for 3 or 4 days. And they had no food, no water, no signal mirror, no nothing. And if they'd had a signal mirror, they saw airplanes go by, but they didn't have any way to attract their attention. So a signal mirror is a good thing to have in your kit, in your car, at all times.
That's a good idea. Yeah, I like that. That's the Apache training in you.
Yep.
Arizona Apaches, right?
Yeah,
Right.
whatever. I learned it in the Army when I was.
Oh yeah,
flying
sure.
helicopters.
Yeah, yeah, all kinds of things, good things. How about
I grew up.
a
I grew up
P-30?
with the I grew up with the Yavapai
You have a
Indians,
did
the
they use
Yavapais.
did they use mirrors, Ken?
Um, my best buddy and I were on the same baseball team, so we played a lot of baseball, but we never used a signal mirror.
There you go. Well, you learned how to throw, right?
That's right.
How
I
about
remember.
a good old P-38, Paul?
I got one of those on my kit right here, except I carry a P-51.
Yeah. Oh,
Uh,
okay. I have a
P-51 is its big brother.
yeah. I have a P-38. Have you seen a P-38, Ken?
P-38 what?
It's a can opener.
Oh,
It's a little
no.
fold open can opener that you can
Yeah,
carry
I
in your
think I think I
keychain.
know what you're talking
It's
about.
got a
Yeah.
little hook thing on it that you put puncture in the
Right.
can and then wiggle it to
Yeah.
get Always have a P3. And there's also a really good tool for people in emergencies, especially if you need to break the window of your car or you need to cut your seat belt. They have tools that you can buy, a little tool that they hang on your keychain, and it's got a blade in it to cut your seat belt, and it also has a little thumper that you can put up against the glass and break the glass.
Yeah.
Especially electric cars. Electric cars, if you drove in the water, and I don't know if the electronics will turn off or not, but they kind of work so that when the battery's dead, they lock up totally. So if you're inside an electric car, there's some real tricks to get into that car once it's secured by the system. So that's a good tool to have there to be able to break the windows.
And one of the things that people don't appreciate is when they first try to break the window, they go right to the center of the window.
Yeah.
And that's where it's strongest. You want to take it into the far corner, up the top, or and right at the corner of the window is where your best chance of getting it to break will be.
Yeah, that's good.
So
So anything else helpful? How about Boy Scout stuff, Ken? Anything you can think of that might help with people with survival?
The one thing I always appreciated in scouting was simple reminders of just common sense things. For bleeding, pressure on the wound.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to remember. We had some situations where we got into some pickles, and I was hiking in northern New Mexico with some buddies up at the Philmont Scout Ranch, and we were climbing up the Tooth of Time, and I stepped onto a big boulder, probably 8 feet in diameter, and it tilted over and rolled over one of my legs, and thought I had broken an ankle and ended up in the hospital. But just knowing how to tie knots.
Yeah.
Lashing a couple pieces of wood together to be able to drag somebody instead of
Right.
carry them.
Making a
So knot
crutch,
tying,
making some kind of crutch.
starting a fire, just common sense things.
Yeah.
What to do if to move blood from one end of the body. Legs up when the face is pale, and
Oh yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, there's some really good. There's some really good now. There's some really good self. I don't know. Not self help's not a good name for them, but they kind of help you recognize emergency medical situations and the minimal things you can do till you get someone the help they need. The real. So there are some really good manuals out there.
there's two good books I can carry with me or keep in my kit here, and that's Dr. Bones and Nurse Amy, Survival Medicine. And then there's another book that's interesting, and this is from a doctor that was in Venezuela, and she kept people alive in Venezuela after the Maduro, debacle there, having to use herbs and local medicines because the Venezuelan hospital system was just wiped dry. There was no operating rooms, no electricity, no medicines. And so she put this book together for people who find themselves in the same situation. So Those are two good things to keep in mind.
Okay, now let's talk about what if what if the emergency is such that you stay in your home?
Yeah, I wanted that. Thank
Yeah.
you, Don, because
Yeah.
the two emergencies you described, Paul, were different type of emergencies where you have to leave your home in a hurry.
Right.
But
What if you have to stay in your home?
what if you
What do
get
you
trapped
need? Yeah.
inside your home by a
Right.
snowstorm or a
Yeah.
Well, okay,
And you lose power. So assume you lose power, you're gonna need.
no
You're gonna.
power.
Yeah. You.
it's called
And it's either hot or cold outside. Either one.
our shelter in place.
Shelter in place. Right.
Yeah. Well, okay. So what you want to keep in mind, knowing that was a possibility, about 10 years ago, I put in solar panels in what's basically called an off-grid system. So I've got solar panels on my roof and batteries, backup batteries, that power my kitchen, my master bedroom, my garage, and it also powers my swamp cooler. So that if we lose the main power from the outside, then I can still have my kitchen cool. I changed my stove from electric to gas and then converted to LP and put in a 100-gallon LP tank so I can still cook my food. I also have an induction burner, which is just a little electric burner that'll run off my batteries, and I can heat my food that way. My refrigerator runs off of that. The microwave runs off of that. So if I lost external power, I don't know. Now, if you don't have all those things, what you want to kind of keep in mind is you probably don't want to depend on your refrigerator. Food's going to start spoiling in your refrigerator within 3 days after the power goes out. So that's not where you want to save your food. You want to have canned food, emergency freeze-dried food, and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
You want to have a way to keep warm, and you got to be careful in how you're keeping warm because you don't want to kill yourself with carbon monoxide. I have a little heater called a Mr. Buddy heater that burns on little 1 pound propane cans, and it has an oxygen sensor in it, so that you can heat up a small room, about a 400 square foot room, with this heater. And if the air quality gets down, if it uses up too much oxygen, it'll shut itself off, so you won't die from carbon monoxide poisoning in there. It's good to have water available inside your house, because if your situation is, as you might have described it there, Ken, maybe it's a freezing snap like those people had in Texas, where they lost power and their water all froze up, their electricity was gone. Some of those people died in their beds frozen.
Wow.
So you want to have a way to keep warm. Blankets, extra clothing, that sort of thing. Now, that's not as big a problem here where I am. It might be more of a problem in Prescott than it is in southern Arizona where I am, but it's still a good idea. We keep extra blankets and things like that for keeping us warm at night. We've got a designated panic room, you might call it, where we keep water and food and that sort of thing. It's in the walk-in closet in our master bedroom. And we can go in there, and we have power from my off-grid system. We've got our food. We can heat our food in there, that sort of thing. So that's what we do. But that's because I'm kind of a fanatic about all that sort of thing.
No, not really. So what about the old days of maybe you guys? Well, Paul does. I don't know if you remember, Ken. I don't know if you guys had the duck and hide or not.
Had the what?
In school, duck and hide.
Get under your get under the desk.
Get under your desk for a nuclear attack, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a good idea. Anyway,
that was a
I was
previous
going to say,
assessment.
a lot of people had underground shelters, had bomb shelters, right?
Well, that's a good idea.
If you're able to do that, that is really, I mean, like you said, you have a safe space you can go to. That would really be a good deal in this day and age.
Yeah. They're kind of expensive.
Oh yeah, I know. Yeah.
But
it wouldn't be cheap. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe you could bury a tiny home.
Well, they don't recommend shipping containers because they're not strong enough.
Oh, really?
all the dirt around them, they'll collapse.
Oh, they will. Yeah, I didn't
Yeah.
know that.
You don't want to use a shipping container,
Yeah.
but you can build them out of cinder blocks that'll withstand the pressure of the dirt. I've seen those. But yeah, there are a lot of ways to protect yourself. You just have to think about them and do some study and understand what you want to protect yourself from.
Right.
We've even been looking at nuclear fallout, radiation fallout, because we're right here by Davis-Monthan, which could be
Right.
it is a designated target.
Yeah, it will be. Sure, any base will be a target. Yeah.
Yeah. So I read up on that, and one of the things they say that it's not as terrible as it might sound, in that just your roof, just having a roof on your house, will protect you from the radiation, and the half-life of the cesium that they use in these nuclear weapons is like 24 hours. So if you've got 800 Roentgens at the blast, within 24 hours it's down to 400, and from 24 hours from that it's a 200, and then after that it starts almost getting into the safe range.
Yeah.
So the main thing you want to do is seal up your house, put plastic over any kind of venting you have, that sort of thing, and stay inside. And that would be a pretty good way to stay ahead of the game there. Of course,
So if you can stay inside a home for 3 or 4 days, that half-life effect,
will pretty soon nullify the danger.
that's cool.
And that, again, food and water.
I mean, I lived in Hiroshima for 3 months.
Oh, wow.
And so
Well, yeah.
I actually knew Japanese people who were alive and in Hiroshima when the bomb went off in
Wow.
45.
Wow.
And
Interesting.
it was a very powerful thing for a young American boy. I was 19 at the time.
Yeah.
I was a Christian missionary in
Right.
southern Japan, and it was a very poignant time of my life to be in one of the 2 places that has experienced an atomic attack.
Yeah.
Did you see any of those atomic shadows?
I did. That's one of the most powerful things that I've ever experienced in my life. I visited the Hiroshima Peace Park and saw there's a section of granite steps that was on some type of a government building, and a little girl was sitting on those steps. And when the bomb went off, her little body was almost immediately vaporized, but it shielded her shadow, and so that her shadow ended up kind of being preserved in the granite, while the rest of the granite was turned a little bit wider. So it looked like her shadow was still in the steps right there. It was very powerful for a young American boy.
So was there any other evidence of the nuclear explosion, Ken? In this, everything pretty much rebuilt?
Everything, in fact, Hiroshima is one of the most beautiful, wide street, wide open, comfortable Japanese cities, because it was entirely leveled, and they rebuilt it with much wider streets and all kinds of things. And it's a beautiful city. But other than the Peace Park, they left the one building that has the metal dome with the shingles gone, but the metal dome is there, and then most of the brick remains of the building. That's kind of the one building that remains.
How about were they on the ocean? They were on the ocean, weren't they?
Yeah, Hiroshima is right on the ocean.
Yeah, it's a kind of a port city.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah, that's really.
Well, one day, my companion, a kid from Washington State, was making breakfast for us, and he was making kind of a cream of wheat thing. And when it was bubbling and boiling and ready to carry over to the table, he looked and couldn't find the hot pads to do that. And he thought, well, if he grabbed it and went fast enough, maybe he could make it to the table. Darn him! And when he moved so quickly, it sloshed over onto his arm and burned his forearm pretty badly. So we rushed him down to a little medical center of some sort. And it was the middle of the summer. It was hot. He was, in pain and miserable. And they wrapped it all up, and we walked back to where our church was. We rented the 3rd floor of this little building, as our church place, but on the first floor was a Japanese liquor store, sake shop.
Yeah.
And as we were walking back to the building, the owner and proprietor of the sake shop was carrying out his wares out to some of them out to the sidewalk to display for people. And he noticed my companion's arm all bundled up and, bandaged up. And he said, what's going on? And he burned his arms very badly. And he says, I think I know how you feel. And he reached down, and we had always noticed that he wore long sleeve shirts, even in the summertime. And he reached down and unbuttoned the one sleeve of his shirt and rolled up his long sleeve shirt and revealed an arm that I don't know how it had stayed on his body. But he told us that he was 7 years old, living in Hiroshima when the bomb went off, and he was kind of facing that direction. So that arm and side of his body took the blast.
Wow.
You could see every tendon, the skin was tight over the bones and the tendons, and how the arm stayed on his body, let alone he could pick up a crate with it 40 years later, was amazing to us. But it really put us in our place that we were concerned with a little bit of cream of wheat burn on my buddy's arm. And then this guy put us in our place with his nuclear blast.
Yeah, that is amazing.
Wounds. So
mine's bigger than yours thing. Huh?
So I was going to say, they do have medical kits now they're selling with iodine. It includes iodine pills to protect your liver from radiation, right?
In 1979, I visited people who were still dying from the radiation poisoning they had experienced in 1945.
Wow. Yeah.
It's potassium iodide, and it protects your thyroid, not your liver.
I'm sorry, your thyroid. Yeah, I didn't mean your liver. Yeah. Protects your thyroid. So, yeah. Wow, 79. So that was 1945 to 79. What is that? 34 years?
34 years.
34 years, yeah. That's, I'm sure there are a lot of, there's no doubt there's a lot of after effects. No telling how many military people actually we sacrificed when we were doing all the testing, right? And for your guys' information, down in southern New Mexico, they set off the original atomic bomb in northern White Sands, the northern part of White Sands, New Mexico, White Sands Base. And you can go there once a year and go to the site where they set the bomb off. And there's kind of a pyramid rock there with a big plaque on it, and there's some other stuff going on around it.
Well,
I took Patty there one year, and she could not figure out what we were doing or why we were there, but I was interested in it just for the engineering of the engineering feat itself, So that's
I was watching a documentary the other night. It's on Netflix, I think, called "The Bomb and the Cold War," and it talked about the time they first tested it, which was just a couple of weeks before they used the live bomb on Hiroshima the first time.
Exactly.
But they kept it so secret that there were Americans in somewhat close proximity to the bomb site. And they specifically mentioned a girls' scout camp, a girls' camp that was only 10 or 12 miles from the blast site. And there were girls there, and not one of the 30 or 40 girls that were at that girls' camp the day of the blast lived to be, only one of them lived to be on 30 years of age.
Oh, goodness. Yeah. Yeah, I've never heard that story. Yeah.
I had never heard that.
Yeah.
But they talked about, and what was the general that was in charge of that? Can't think of his name right now, but anyway, they obviously picked New Mexico because it was so sparsely populated, but that didn't mean there weren't anybody anywhere.
Yeah, I think
there were a few.
I think it was General Groves.
Groves. But they picked these for reasons. But
Oh, yeah, yeah.
there were a few people still within a close enough proximity that they paid the price as well.
Yeah, it takes quite a while to drive from the highway down into the area where it is. It's got to be 20, 25 miles from the highway as you go south into White Sands, where they let you in to go to the site. So anyway, okay, guys, good conversation today.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And Ken, we really appreciate you participating as a state senator. I mean, that's pretty cool.
Well, next week I will be a retired state senator or a former state senator or an emeritus or a something.
Yeah.
But my term does end on Monday.
Were you able to give anybody good advice today?
Yes.
Good.
We solved some problems today.
Good. Well, that's good. Well, very good. Okay, Paul, thanks for all the good information about survival, and you guys be safe. Hope you can join us next week. Will be the 9th, right?
No, today's the 9th. So next week
today's
will be
9th, 16th. Gee, what am I saying?
16th.
So okay, who's picking who for the college football championship? You guys have a team you think's going to win it?
Obviously, I was rooting for my Sun Devils from ASU, and
Yeah.
I think they got robbed. I think they got robbed on that non-targeting call. But Ohio State looked pretty powerful, beating Oregon.
Yeah.
And Notre Dame looked pretty tough. So I think they will win the next two games, and then I'll have to give you a
okay. Well,
a prediction after that.
We can wait. So
okay.
I would. Yeah, that's fine.
I read real quickly. I read a story many years ago about this guy that got a postcard, and it was on the NFL, and it said Detroit's going to beat San Francisco next week. And so he just looked at it and put it away, and sure enough, Detroit beat San Francisco. And the next week he got another card that said the Bears are going to beat the Browns, or whatever it was.
Yeah.
This went on and so this guy kept getting these postcards that predicted next week's game. And finally it came down to the Super Bowl, and he got a postcard from these guys that said, send us $5,000 and we'll tell you who's going to win the Super Bowl. So he sent them $5,000, and they sent him back the name, and that team didn't win. And he got all upset, and he turned out it was a scam. And what they were doing was they sent out 100,000 postcards, half that said San Francisco and half that said Detroit. And then when the Detroit lost, they scraped those people off the list, and they sent out 50,000 with the Browns and the thing. And every time the team would lose, they'd scrape those people off the list. So they only sent the postcards for the Super Bowl to the people that had gotten every winning card.
Right.
Okay.
And then they hit them up for $5,000 for the answer to the Super Bowl game.
Man,
there's a way to get money out of every fool.
I know. Right. People work so hard, spend so much time developing these scams. Wouldn't it be nice if they did something productive? I mean, we'd be such a better country.
Must be productive to them. They made some money off of it.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. So, okay. Well, God bless you.
Thanks, guys.
Take care. We will see you next week on the 19th. Thanks, everybody.
16th.
16th. Sorry.